Bine v-am găsit, doamnelor și domnilor, la primul interviu din seria interviurilor Companiei Română de Știri. Invitatul nostru special de astăzi este domnul Angelos Angelou, fondatorul și directorul executiv principal al AngelouEconomics, dar și CEO-ul International Accelerator, cu sediul în Austin, Texas. Domnul Angelos Angelou a ocupat timp de 12 ani și funcția de vicepreședinte al Camerei de Comerț din Austin, calitate în care a reușit să atragă 26 de miliarde de dolari în investiții de capital și alte 19 miliarde de dolari în investiții ulterioare, prin care s-au creat în întreg statul Texas aproximativ 300.000 de locuri de muncă directe și indirecte. Domnul Angelos este recunoscut pe scară largă drept arhitectul șef al recunoașterii orașului Austin, drept centru de înaltă tehnologie recunoscut pe plan internațional. Domnul Angelou a și fost distins recent cu una dintre cele mai importante distincții ale statului Texas de către guvernatorul statului Texas și de către primarul orașului Austin, în semn de recunoaștere pentru contribuția pe care și-a adus-o la dezvoltarea economică a statului Texas și a orașului Austin. De asemenea, ar mai fi de menționat că domnul Angelos Angelou a ocupat posturi de consiliu și de consiliere atât în cadrul Alianței pentru Inovare Statele Unite ale Americii China, cât și în cadrul Consiliului pentru Dezvoltare Economică Internațională, fiind unul dintre consilierii de încredere ai fostului președinte american George Herbert Bush. Doamnelor și domnilor, așadar, un invitat deosebit, un invitat care ne va menține atenția pe tot parcursul acestui interviu, mai ales că vom face referiri la situația economică internațională care este dictată astăzi, mai ales de conflictul din Ucraina. Mr. Angelou, it's a great honor for us to interview one of the leading economists in the United States and around the world. The first question, Mr. Angelou, is of course related to the current economic situation specific to a new Cold War between the United States and Russia. According to the February report, the annual inflation rate in the United States has reached its highest level in 40 years. In a statement to CNN, President Biden said, "A major contribution to this month's inflations comes from rising gas and energy prices in response to Putin's aggressive actions." How big are the concerns of American businessmen about the alarming rise in prices, especially for energy?
Well, certainly energy prices have been rising, food prices have been rising, but this has been happening even before the war. Supply chain concerns, the pandemic have all caused inflation to rise in the US prior to the war. The war has just exacerbated inflation. It's going to lead to a recession in the US economy in 2023 for sure, maybe even beyond, because it's certainly unpredictable as to how this situation is going to end. Moreover, the Fed in the United States has been tightening interest rates, increasing interest rates, and reducing its balance sheet, which is also intended to slow down the economy. So we have two storms coming together at the same time. First, the concern to fight inflation. Secondly, the declining rate of US economic growth that are coming together, and it's going to have some significant impacts on not only the US economy, but the European economy and the global economy as a whole.
Can we talk in this moment about opening the door to a new era of energy resources?
Well, the Russian economy is very small compared to world trade and GDP. However, it is a resource-based economy. So the impact of this war now is felt on energy, it's going to be felt on food prices. It's going to hurt a lot of people, particularly the lower class socioeconomic groups are going to be affected with rising food prices. As you know, people at the lower socioeconomic level, they spend more on food than higher income people. So it's going to be a situation where it's going to be unattainable. What has to happen, no one really knows. Hopefully, the war is going to end soon. That is a hope and a wish. I don't know that that is going to be the case. And some of the sanctions could be lifted. However, I will say that there is quite a bit of understanding in the West, particularly the US, perhaps is becoming understood in Europe, that keeping democracy alive has a price, and people are willing to pay that higher price to have freedom of choice, to have freedom of the economic environment, and so forth and so on. So we are ready to take in higher price increases. How long it is yet to be determined.
What do you think Europe needs to do now to stop the crisis from deepening? I ask you because you know very well the European economic realities. AngelouEconomics having important clients in Europe in the public sector, among which we would list countries such as Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, Spain, Cyprus, Greece, Malta, Portugal, and others.
Well, I'm not so sure that Europe can do anything at this point in time. I think Ukraine and Russia can do a lot to reach an agreement, hopefully soon, where peace can be established, that maybe the political and economic situation can start to normalize. But it's going to take months, if not maybe years, for the situation to normalize, in particular to energy prices and food prices. As you know, Ukraine and Russia account for 40% of the grain exports around the world. So with that crop being limited in supply right now, it's causing food prices to rise not only in the US, but globally. So a lot of people are going to be having to pay higher prices, and some people may even go hungry. So I'm not so sure that Europe can do much other than provide relief and economic patches, I guess, to stem the impact of rising food prices and energy prices on the people. But that's also not a situation that can be supported and attained long term. Long term, the only solution is to find peace and hopefully bring back the political environment, which is going to lead to more economic normalization of relationships between the European countries as well as the US and the Western world.
Putin's war in Ukraine has made NATO's military alliance even stronger. If the military model of the world's democracies has worked flawlessly this time around, why can we talk about an economic alliance developed on the structure of NATO?
Well, NATO is an association of freedom-fighting countries. There are functioning and democracies with a very liberal economic system. So in a way, it is an economic alliance as well as a military alliance. What perhaps needed to happen early on, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, is for NATO to have intervened. I don't think we had anything to worry about militarily. Just many countries within the European Atlantic community decided that they did not want to be engaged in the war, and that is what brought the Russians in. And it's going to be tough right now to find a solution that will be mutually agreeable to both Russia and Ukraine. Neither side wants to give up. The war is going to continue for the foreseeable future. And whatever fallout there is from this war, it will be. Unfortunately, I don't see a quick ending of this as perhaps some would have hoped for. So that means that we're going to have to bite the bullet, as we say in the US. We're going to have to put up with higher energy prices, consumer prices, higher inflation, and lower economic growth at the same time, global economic growth. And by the way, this war is not necessarily hurting the Ukrainian, excuse me, it's not hurting, this war is not hurting the Russian and Ukrainian economy. It's hurting the entire world, regardless of which camp you're on and supporting. Half of the world is not with the US and Western Europe on this war. So that is going to have serious implications on trade and sanctions, perhaps, for many, many of these countries for years to come. So the world has to brace itself for long-term, slower economic growth, higher food prices and energy, and higher inflation, which coming at the end of the pandemic is going to be a perfect storm. We did not need this war. This was a war of choice, but it's there, and we have to face the realities, which I just spoke about: higher inflation, higher food prices, high energy prices, and much slower economic growth worldwide. In fact, at least in the US, we're expecting a recession probably towards the end of the year, for sure, early next year.
Mr. Angelou, you are one of those who contributed to the development of the relationship with China within the George Herbert Bush Foundation. You have had and still have an important role to play in the United States-China Development Alliance. Do you think President Biden is moving away from what President George Herbert Bush said? One of my dreams for our world is for these two powerful giants to continue to work for a full partnership and friendship that will bring peace and friendship, prosperity to people everywhere. Is it possible for these two giants to go on totally different economic paths?
They already are. I don't think there is a possibility of reapproachment between the US and China. The Biden administration, as well as everyone else, has declared that China is the number one arch rival, both militarily and economically, to the US. Our policy has been for the last few years, including under the Trump administration, to try to contain China. Unfortunately, too little has happened, and just only in the last few years, to contain them. And I don't think it's possible to contain China. China has a great economy, soon to become the largest economy in the world. And, one of the things that has happened, and this is not something that people are aware of, just only last week, several US congressmen pointed the danger of this. In the last 18 years, China increased trade with Latin America from 7 billion to 355 billion. So they're taking over that economic relationship in Latin America, right in the backyard of the United States. I'm afraid that this situation is going to become worse. And who is to predict what will happen in trade between China and Latin America and the rest of the world in the next 20 years? The Chinese economy is the only one that is growing substantially. They're definitely a force to be reckoned with, both politically and economically. And when you have economic power, naturally, you're going to have political power as well, because everyone leverages the economic power to establish a political landscape favorable to themselves now and in the future. So China definitely is doing that, and there is nothing to stop them.
Mr. Angelou, you are the economic personality who set the record for attracting $26 billion in capital investment and creating over 300,000 direct and indirect jobs in Austin and Texas. In an interview you gave in 2019, you invite European entrepreneurs to launch it on the American market as soon as they have a well-prepared product or service. Would it be one of the European solutions to stop the crisis, namely the massive presence of European investors on the American market?
Well, I've long been a proponent of creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem in every country, whether it's small or large, or whether it's poor or wealthy. I think there's been a significant innovation taking place around the globe in many countries of the world, and that will continue. Given that the US is the largest market in the world in terms of the economic market size, but also the empowerment of entrepreneurship, I would think that many foreign-born entrepreneurs that want to be discovered, that want to scale their businesses, will eventually find their way to the US market. This is the market that rewards hard work, innovation, like no other country in the world. And this is where companies raise capital to expand their growth, not only in the US, in Europe, but globally. So this trend will continue. I'm a huge supporter of that. My efforts in the International Accelerator, which I founded and I'm the CEO, are related to this effort. Today, more than 53% of all entrepreneurs in the US are foreign-born. More than 40 of the top IPOs in the US every year have a founder or co-founder that is foreign-born. And when you look at IBM and Google and Microsoft and Facebook, they're all run by foreign-born entrepreneurs. So we're tough as we are adaptable to any situation. We're hardworking and we're frugal. And we have a determination and hunger to succeed. And that is really why foreign-born entrepreneurs do well in the US market. We're hungrier than the US counterparts, if you will. We're more determined. Failure is not an option. All of these qualities create a drive and the energy that is necessary to scale up many foreign-born entrepreneur companies in the US market, and by virtue then the global market. I'm going to continue to do that through the International Accelerator that we've created. We've returned quite a bit of capital to our investors. We are about to raise a $50 million fund to bring about even significant more efforts towards our goal in bringing more foreign-born entrepreneurs from throughout the world to the US market and help them achieve their goals.
There is a lot of talk about creating alternative energy resources to reduce Europe's dependence on Russian energy resources. It is clear that the United States is trying to provide Europe with liquefied gas. There is talk again with wind energy, solar energy, but little is said about the development and application of inventions that produce fuel and energy from biomass, plant waste and waste. In your opinion, how should the inventors who are not protected by the states proceed? And it's not just about the Romanian inventors, but also about those from other Eastern Europe states who are in similar situations.
I guess stop importing energy from Russia, both in oil and gas and coal, is going to be a long-term challenge. It cannot happen overnight. And I've always been a believer that in the advent of economic pressure, more innovation is going to take place, whether it's biomass, whether it's renewable energy through wind and solar, whether it's even more nuclear power. We will do whatever we need to do for as long as we are determined to lower our dependence on Russian imports of energy to accomplish that. And it will be accomplished to some extent. It will take many years. I don't think it can happen overnight. And, whether it's biomass or other sources of energy, there's quite a bit of innovations that are just difficult to scale in short time to become a meaningful source of energy globally, to stem our, imports of energy from Russia. But it will happen. It will happen gradually over time and steadily so. Here in Texas, we are the global energy hub in wind, and now we're becoming on solar. There is close to 22 gigawatts of wind power. This could triple and quadruple as long as we build our infrastructure to carry that power to the major population centers. Unfortunately, the transmission lines are full, and there's no immediate way of transferring that potential of future energy generation by wind and solar to the population centers. Wind and solar are hundreds of kilometers from Austin and Dallas and Houston and San Antonio, all the major cities where energy can be consumed. And, that is a solution, perhaps, that would allow for more LNG exports from the US. But, for the short term, I don't think much changes. Perhaps there will be a realignment of where people buy energy from. India, China are increasing imports of energy from Russia, whether it's coal and whether it's any other form. And Europe is going to be buying more LNG from Qatar and the US. And hopefully this will bring about a realignment of energy buying around the world that would perhaps allow us to become independent of Russian oil and gas, but it's going to take a few years. It cannot happen overnight.
AngelouEconomics is the leading consulting company in economic development strategy, over 600 cities in the United States of America. What is the key to success in attracting investment in smaller cities, as are most cities in Romania and in Eastern Europe in general?
We've developed the economic development strategies for about 12 states and about a dozen countries in Europe as well. A small community is actually quite attractive today because people cannot put up any longer with the increased cost of housing, the transportation congestion in major cities, and more people are moving to the suburbs and even beyond the suburbs to many small communities. Secondly, the rise of remote work, which was forced upon us from the pandemic. It's here to stay. Nearly 50% of the workers now in technology, in IT in the US are remote workers and not likely to ever go back to work out of an office. Companies have become accustomed to that. They are more profitable as a result. They've learned how to manage their employees working out of home. And that favors actually growth in smaller communities. Today, a worker is not confined to work within a half an hour or an hour commute of their employer's location. People are working all over the world, and the workforce therefore has become global. And because talent has become a huge problem in specific markets in the US. Austin is experiencing a huge economic boom with substantial job creation, even though we are very well positioned vis-a-vis other cities in the US. We're still facing labor shortages, particularly in talented people in IT. And that will continue for many, many years. So many of our companies are going to have to source those employees from India, from perhaps Romania, which is and used to be even a greater place for IT contract work, Ukraine, hopefully to some extent, and Latin America as well. Mexico, Brazil, Chile, Argentina now are becoming huge places for what I would say contract IT work, remote workers.
Mr. Angelou, what do you know about Romania? What should Romania to do be more visible in the United States of America?
Well, the US actually is quite well aware of Romania, and it goes back into many years of gymnastics, where many of your athletes had become the sweethearts of the US population here in international competitions.
Beautiful woman, of course.
Beautiful women, beautiful country. I love Romania. I've been there at the invitation of Mr. Andrei Buzatu, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. One of our portfolio
Our
companies,
friend and partner.
one of our, absolutely. And I cannot say enough about the tenacity and the perseverance of Andrei, which are the highest qualities that an economic development expert could have. So I'm a good friend of his, and I hope to continue that relationship for many years. Romania has also been a powerhouse in IT. Many companies from the US have operations in Romania, including from Austin. National Instruments has a place in Cluj. I know Dell Computer is there. There's probably 2 or 3 dozen major employers from Austin that have operations in Romania. It's got a great talent pool, and to the extent that is not exhausted, I think will continue to grow, and it will continue to attract investment from the US, particularly in the area of contract IT work, or setting up expansions from major US companies in Romania. I know Amazon has done it recently. I know that the city of Iași in the north is looking at creating joint ventures with MD Anderson here in Texas, which is the largest cancer hospital in the world. Kudos to them for seizing on this opportunity to establish a relationship with this very large institution that can only result in perhaps a larger engagement and hopefully more investments in Romania, particularly in the life sciences sector and cancer specifically. I'm well aware of, however, the lack of effort from the Romanian government to approach US investors. There's no Romanian investment promotion agency presence in the US for all practical purposes. So cities are now forced to do international work on their own. Partners like Andrei Buzatu is definitely trying to establish relationships with the rest of the world on his own. But, you know, the government needs to become serious and support an ever aggressive effort in the US in lieu of the fact that we expect lower economic growth in Europe and everywhere else. I think everyone needs to look after their interests, and I would highly recommend that Romania considers opening an investment promotion office in the US, maybe not only in one location, but 2 or 3 locations to attract foreign direct investment from this country.
Mr. Angelos Angelou, thank you for the interview, and we hope that as soon as possible the Romanian news company, together with government decision makers and business associations, will have you as a guest in Romania for a conference on economic strategy, Romanian at the Black Sea. Good luck in everything you do. Thank you very much.